I'm going to let go of this ball. What will happen when I do? Of course, no surprise, you knew it was going to fall. You knew this on almost an instinctual level. And if you know a little bit of physics, you know about gravity and potential energy, so you knew that the ball really had no choice but to fall. If you understand a lot of physics, like air resistance, sound waves, and the physical properties of the ball and the floor it was dropped on, you could perfectly predict the exact speed, path, and noise the ball would make before I even dropped it. With physics, we can carefully examine the causal relationships between physical forces. And we're happy to do the same with plant cells and biology. Give a certain amount of fertilizer, the plant will grow a predictable amount bigger. Also with chemistry, mixing the same chemical compounds will always produce the same reaction. Each of these processes are what we call deterministic, and it's vital to the scientific method. But most people really don't like the idea that human behavior is fully determined. That, just like me letting go of the ball, we humans have causal factors like our genes and our upbringing that are the cause of each of our behaviors. After all, what about my sense of free will, my ability to choose my behavior? And we need to punish people for their criminal behavior, don't we? Doesn't all of that fall apart if we accept that behavior is out of our control? The PsychBoost flashcard app has a new feature. Test yourself with over 1,500 multiple choice questions, including every topic on A-level and GCSE psychology. Try paper 1 for free right now. And Patreon supporters can watch PsychBoost videos ad-free, learn from over 17 hours of exclusive exam tutorial videos, and access hundreds of digital and printable resources, including mind maps, quiz sheets, worksheets, teaching slides, and more. The scientific emphasis on causal explanations. I introduced this video with an example from physics. This is because in your science education so far, whether you know it or not, you've been given a wide variety of causal explanations. For example, in physics, you know about the movement and interactions of physical objects. A white ball hitting a red ball causes the red ball to move. In biology, giving a plant more fertilizer and light is the cause of the plant growing rapidly. In chemistry, you know that adding a controlled volume of one chemical to another under the same conditions will always produce the same chemical reaction. Science depends on causal explanations to explain our world and make predictions. And when the scientific principles are well understood, these predictions are very accurate. These processes are determined. The balls, plants, and chemicals could not choose to act in any other way. Using the same reasoning, psychology, as the scientific study of the brain and behavior, attempts to understand human behavior using causal explanations. Human behavior is varied, and you've likely studied a range of it in this course. Relationships, addiction, mental illness, gender identity, conformity, and aggression all have a number of competing causal explanations. These causal explanations can be tested for validity under controlled conditions using the scientific method, creating and testing hypotheses. Experiments are conducted, with the only thing changing being the independent variable. All of the variables are controlled, and the change in the dependent variable is measured. If an experiment is well controlled, and the scientist, in this case a psychologist, finds a consistent and significant difference in the dependent variable between the experimental levels, they can claim to have discovered a cause and effect relationship. I know that was a little intense, and in this video I want to prepare you to explain what is meant by the scientific emphasis on causal explanations. Still, if all this talk of IVs and DVs is confusing, you should review these research methods videos. Free will and determinism. When applied to humans, the scientific emphasis on causal explanations has an important implication: determinism. The idea that our traits, like our personality and our behaviors, are not in our control. They're set by forces outside of our control. These factors may be internal, like our biology, or external, like the culture we've grown up in and the life events we've experienced. Now, I imagine this is hard to accept for most of you, as most people believe in free will. And you do constantly experience your conscious mind making decision after decision. And you feel, in a very real way, you are in control of these decisions. This position, arguing that people consciously decide their behavior without constraints, is the opposite of determinism. A determinist would argue that this sense of free will is an illusion. There is a middle position, soft determinism. Now, the exact definition is fiercely debated by philosophers, but I'm going to stick closely to the definitions given in previous mock schemes, so apologies if it's a little different to what you may have learned in class. Soft determinism is the idea that traits and behaviours are, to an extent, dictated by internal and external forces. However, we do have some level of control over our behaviour through thought processes. Each approach to psychology has a different perspective on free will and determinism, and we need to know about biological, environmental, and psychic determinism. Behaviours are the best example of environmental determinists. Environmental determinism suggests our experiences in the world shape our behaviour. So we've learnt to behave in certain ways based on factors like reinforcement. Social learning theorists are also environmental determinists, but their inclusion of internal mental processes complicates this. So you may argue that, like cognitive psychologists, they're also soft determinists. If we want to be technical, Bandura came up with the idea of something called reciprocal determinism. As we can't be asked to define reciprocal determinism directly, I'll save that idea for the evaluations. As internal mental processes are thought to be the mechanism by which determinist forces can be overcome, it's cognitive psychologists who are the soft determinists. It won't surprise you to learn that biological psychologists agree with biological determinism. The idea that causal factors that influence our behaviour include genetics and biological processes like the levels of hormones and neurotransmitters in our body and brain. Freud thought that unconscious forces determine behaviour. These forces are innate drives that are then shaped by childhood experience. If we wanted to give examples, we could include the conflict between the id, ego and superego, fixations at stages of psychosexual development, and the defense mechanisms the unconscious mind uses to protect the conscious mind from anxiety. I won't go into a deep dive here on all of the unconscious psychodynamic concepts we could use to explain behaviour, but if you need a reminder of the role of repression, denial and displacement, and what the fixations are, check out my video on psychodynamics. Only humanists argue for free will, because they're the only approach that rejects the scientific method as a way of studying human behaviour. Instead, they think we make decisions unconstrained by prior causes. Evaluating free will and determinism. Perhaps the most convincing argument for free will is the fact it feels like we have free will. It has face validity. People experience making a range of decisions every day and feel like when they do make a decision, they could have chosen the other option. By taking a determinist perspective, assuming the scientific principle of cause and effect applies to human behaviour, psychologists have reliably predicted and influenced behaviour. This has been helpful. For example, biological determinism argues that the symptoms of mental illness are due to an imbalance of neurotransmitters, and drug treatments have been developed to correct this imbalance. These treatments have gone on to help many millions of individuals reduce symptoms, live their lives more normally, and return to work, contributing to the economy. But there are serious implications for society if we take a truly deterministic view. What does it mean for education if some people are genetically determined to have higher intelligence? Should places at the best universities be reserved from infancy based on DNA tests? If violent offending behaviour can be predicted by analysing childhood experiences, should we see the criminals as not responsible for their crimes? Or perhaps lock them away before they've had the opportunity to harm their victims? These are difficult questions and show how the way we've constructed our society depends on the idea of free will. An idea that scientific psychology is challenging. Viewing behaviour as a result of any one determining factor is likely too simplistic. Any behaviour is likely the result of the interaction of multiple determining factors. Also, a more complex form of determinism, reciprocal determinism, is suggested by Bandura. This argues the world around us determines our actions, but our actions also have a role in determining the world we live in. So, for example, a child misbehaving at school creates a bad relationship with their teachers, which then results in the teachers being less friendly to the child, which makes the child dislike school even more, resulting in even worse behaviour. Cognitive neuroscience research has shown that brain areas make decisions before conscious awareness is reported. Classic EEG research by Lebert in the 1980s showed a readiness potential that appeared to make a decision less than a second before awareness of a conscious decision. This famous research is criticised due to the brief time delay, but modern fMRI research has found when asked to press a button with the left or right hand, a signal that predicts which hand will be used is detectable 7 seconds before the participant is aware of making the decision. This research suggests that the conscious decisions we experience are an illusion, and the decision has already been made by other areas of the brain. Just a final point, and this isn't for your A-level, so you can stop taking notes. Or you can skip this entirely if you don't want to hear me ramble on about something deep. This free will and determinism question has likely got you thinking about your life. I've thought about the implications of determinism a fair bit. Possibly more than most, as my degree was in psychology with philosophy, and free will is more of a philosophical question. You may want to know where I stand on the debate. As much as I would like to believe in free will, I try to avoid my beliefs being shaped by what I want to be true, by bias. So I try to base what I accept on evidence. The scientific method seems to be the best way we have of collecting and assessing evidence. Considering that, I have to be honest with myself. Everything science tells us is the physical world follows predictable laws, or in quantum physics, truly random processes. There's just no room for what we would normally describe as free will. I'm a physical creature, so I have no doubt my neurons follow the same rules as everything else in the universe. I do have the experience of consciousness, the feeling of being in the world, considering my options and making decisions. And that is hard to explain. However, I think it's likely the conscious mind is as deterministic as the unconscious. I think this feeling of freedom is an illusion, in a similar way to how your mind recreates a model of the world inside the biological synapses of the brain based on limited sensory information received by the sense organs. It doesn't feel like what we experience is a recreation. It feels like we're directly experiencing the world exactly as it is. We sometimes realize that isn't true when we see a visual illusion. I think in the same way we can see we're not truly in control when we do actions that go against what we feel are our conscious decisions. Like we don't resist a chocolate cake even though we've decided to be on a diet. But in those moments our consciousness rationalizes a decision that's already been made. I've had a hard day, so I'll allow myself some cake. So, perhaps, like me, you accept the determinist argument. How should you live your life? That's a tricky one. And some people think it leads to apathy, people thinking, what's the point? I don't think that at all. I think the most sensible way to act is to live as though you have free will. Allow your conscious minds to carefully consider the big issues in your life. Plan, have hopes for the future, and enjoy the ride. I do think on a deeper level, this conscious process is just as deterministic. But that's fine. But if you do accept your beliefs and actions are not in your control, but have been shaped by your previous experiences, then knowing this, it's easier to forgive yourself when you make mistakes. If you carefully consider why you act the way you do, thinking about the causes of your behavior can be a cause for future change and potentially help you live a better life. And possibly more importantly, thinking about determinism can help you forgive the stupidity and harmful actions of others, both in your private lives and on a bigger social level. I don't think that most destructive behavior is a conscious attempt at being malicious, but is shaped, at least in part, by biology or environment outside of any individual's control. And if we work together as a society, if we can understand those causal factors, we could change them. Anyway, that's enough existential crises for one day. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. I want to thank everyone over on Patreon for supporting the channel. Because of you, I've been able to teach part-time, meaning I can make Psych Boost on YouTube for everyone. I do have extra resources that are exclusive for my patrons, so if you've decided to sign up, you can grab those over on my website. And these include over 100 exam question tutorial videos, of course including questions on the Issues and Debates unit. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next Psych Boost video.